When Ben Sachs suggested that Melissa Weininger would be a wonderful scholar for us to bring to Beth Am, I wasn't, I must confess, so familiar with her scholarship, but I had known Melissa when she was a graduate student in Chicago, studying at the University of Chicago, and attending Ashkenazi Synagogue, which was her home synagogue. And what an honor and delight to be able to welcome Dr. Weininger to Beth Am now, having now, I guess it was 19 years, 18 years ago, officiated at her son Noam's Pidyon Haben. Is that right? How old is Noam? 18. So what a delight to know her family, her parents, and now to welcome you. We learned some really interesting Torah last night. She gave a talk on the new Hebrew. Today she will not be teaching about the new Hebrew. She'll be teaching this afternoon after lunch on demons and the divine, a brief history of Jewish monsters, and then giving a third talk tomorrow where she'll be able to use media. She wasn't able to last night, but on Sunday morning she'll be doing Beyond the Land, Diaspora Israeli Culture in the 21st Century, which also builds on her research captured in her recent book, which will also be available for purchase tomorrow as well. So really looking forward to that. Dr. Melissa Weininger is Assistant Professor of Jewish Studies at Cal State Northridge. Her research focuses on Hebrew and Yiddish literature. Her emphasis is on contemporary Israeli literature, but she's also interested in gender, nationalism, popular culture, and a particular interest in Israeli television. It's my honor at this time to call on Melissa Weininger to offer some words of Torah.
Okay, so when you were doing the baby naming, I also remembered that I think that you did my daughter's great book.
Also a great book.
Yes. So, Rabbi Berg has officiated at all of my children's covenantal events.
Yeah, we're gonna call your mom after Shabbos.
Yes, exactly.
We're gonna Sheb Nafas together.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, but today I'm going to talk not about new anything, but ancient stuff. So, actually, I said that, and the word TikTok is in the first paragraph. So I can't get away from it. I'm obsessed with popular culture. So, I was told yesterday that I used slang that was appreciated by some of the younger members of the audience. So, okay. I don't know if I'm going to do that now, but I'll try. And also just to thank you for welcoming me into your community, your very lovely community, and your beautiful synagogue. It's been a pleasure to be here. There's a popular aphorism that circulates in certain parts of the internet that goes, men are afraid that women will laugh at them, women are afraid that men will kill them. And while this sounds like contemporary feminist, TikTok-ish meme messaging, this week's Parsha is actually, I think, one long illustration of this idea, only it depicts events that were supposed to have happened thousands of years ago. The Parsha begins with women's laughter, when mysterious strangers pay a visit to an elderly Abraham and Sarah. They tell the couple that by next year, when they return, Sarah will have given birth to a son. Sarah laughs. The text already told us that she had stopped menstruating. Who wouldn't laugh? Although the text is very explicit that Sarah laughed to herself, God intervenes and asks Abraham, not Sarah, Abraham, why she laughed, taking as an insult to God's omnipotence or a sign of Sarah's lack of faith. Frightened, Sarah lies and pretends she didn't laugh, but God insists that God knows she did. God's wrath at Sarah's laughter, Sarah's fear of God, the scene ends in this moment of tension with the implication of punishment, a menacing subtext. This menace is then reflected in the litany of stories that follow, which all illustrate the myriad ways that women are demeaned and punished in the Torah, stories that do not sound familiar in our own, unfamiliar, in our own world, even though they are ancient. Immediately after leaving Abraham and Sarah, the angelic visitors go to see Lot in Sodom. There, to placate the townspeople who wish to harm the visitors, Lot instead offers them his daughters to sexually violate without hesitation. Then, when the city is being destroyed, although Lot's family is saved from the massacre, his wife violates the angel's prohibition against looking back toward the city and is turned into a pillar of salt, silent and unmoving. After their escape, Lot's daughters, mistaking what they have witnessed for the end of the world, decide they need to continue the human line by reproducing with their own father. So they get him drunk and force him into incestuous activity. And soon after, Sarah re-enters the narrative when Abraham lies to King Abimelech that she's his sister, and Abimelech makes her his consort against her will. And when Sarah does eventually bear Abraham's son, the son that she was promised, she insists that Abraham cast out Hagar, her own maid, whom she allowed Abraham to violate in order to have a child by proxy, Ishmael. Finally, Abraham himself is asked to kill Sarah's child and takes him away without her knowledge to do so. And that's the last we hear of her final punishment for that surreptitious laugh at God. She dies at the beginning of the next parsha. Judith Plasko asks two questions about this parsha that cut to the heart of the complexity of Sarah's laugh and her fear. She asks first, in Lot's treatment of his daughters and in the Torah's lack of comment on that treatment, can we see the casual acceptance, indeed the invisibility, of violence against women that is so ubiquitous in many cultures, including our own? Considered in the context of the many other violent or horrifying consequences suffered by women in this parsha, largely at the hands of men, her question takes on even more resonance. The parsha reports these incidents objectively, with no moral outrage at the treatment or fate of the women in these tales who are used, manipulated, and abused by men in virtually every episode. This should inspire us, especially now, as the rabbi noted earlier, to think about the ways that the patriarchal subjugation of women is built into the fabric of our traditions. But not all of the victimization of women in this parsha is perpetrated by men. In one notable instance, when Sarah instructs Abraham to banish Hagar and Ishmael to the wilderness and near certain death, it's a woman perpetrating violence against another woman. Of this incident, Plaskow asks, can we see the ways in which marginalized peoples are all too liable to duplicate patterns of subordination from which they themselves have suffered? What Sarah learned when she laughed was that no one, not even God, existed to protect her. This was confirmed when she saw the fate of Lot's daughters and his wife, when Abraham was quick to hand her over without consent to Abimelech. The lesson that she took from this experience was that there was no room for solidarity or compassion, that if she wanted to live, and her child to live, she needed to do what she thought she had to do to protect herself, even if the consequence of her own protection was the death of innocence. Sarah must have seen the way that Abraham negotiated with God for the protection of innocents in Sodom and witnessed this failure. Again, from this she learned to save herself, even at the expense of others. The lesson Sarah derived from her own victimization was that she didn't care about right and wrong, only survival. But she doesn't survive. Sarah disappears entirely from the narrative after this episode, suffering a tragedy that precisely parallels the one she has caused to be perpetrated on Hagar. Her son is brought to the verge of death. When Hagar is sent into the wilderness, her water soon runs out, and she realizes that Ishmael will die of dehydration. When Hagar begins to cry, God notably does not hear her. But the text reports that God has heard the, quote, cry of the boy, and that they will be saved because of his importance as, quote, the father of a great nation. Hagar's name literally means stranger, and she is treated as one by Sarah, if not by God. Ishmael's name means God will hear. Though Hagar too cries out, her son is the only one heard. Even now, it is not Hagar's own suffering that matters, but that of her young child, because while she is only a mother, he will be a father. While she is one woman, he is a nation. Soon after, God instructs Abraham to take Sarah's son, Isaac, into the wilderness in a parallel movement to the one she-for son, Hagar. Isaac, like Ishmael, is also in danger, also at the hand of his father, who is instructed by God, still punishing Sarah for that laugh God didn't like, maybe, to kill him as a sign of devotion. As we all know, at the last minute, God stays Abraham's hand, and the traditional interpretation is that this is a religious lesson about the importance of faith and divine protection, or a historical lesson about how the Israelites eschewed child sacrifice in favor of more ethical forms of divine worship, or a moral lesson about the value of human life. I'm going to propose another, perhaps hidden lesson here. This ending to Sarah's story, the one that began with her laugh, witnessed the violent subjugation of her cousins and herself, and led to her own victimization of the woman with whom she shared a household and an immediate family connection. Teaches us the value and importance of solidarity. The lessons Sarah learned from her own subjugation and that of the women around her was the wrong lesson, and that is the source of her punishment. She's not punished by God, she punishes herself. The isolation of a life lived without the community of the marginalized and the unheard. The Torah points out so clearly all the ways in which Sarah and Hagar are in parallel situations and are similarly marginalized, ignored, and punished for being women. But Sarah, within the bubble of her own terrified laughter, doesn't see the value in that. Instead, her son is taken, she is silenced, and she dies. Looking at their stories from the outside, from the vantage point of thousands of years of experience as the marginalized ourselves, we have the opportunity to see that the connection between Sarah and Hagar was deep and potentially powerful, that the alternative to banishment is action in solidarity with those who are also marginalized, that violence against women, against children, against the innocent people of Sodom creates victims who will become victimizers, and the only path away from more violence is toward each other. Thank you. Shabbat shalom.